It's hard to believe it's been a solid decade since Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater released as a Wii U exclusive in 2015. That's right, this game is now a decade old, at least if you're an American. It came out the year before in Japan. So the fact of the matter is, it's been 11 years since this game came out, and it's only relatively recently gotten a Switch port, which I skipped out on because of just not really having a desire to revisit it on the platform. I just didn't really see the point. I owned the game already. I hadn't really gotten all the endings and played it. And honestly, I kind of had mixed feelings on the game anyway. And this is the first time I have played through the game all the way to the end since it first came out. So this is my second playthrough on Nintendo Switch. This is a game I've been really anxious to come back to for a long time because a part of me felt like I didn't really give it a good chance or that I didn't spend enough time with it because I never actually got any of the other endings outside of the ones I got on my first playthrough. So there was this feeling that, I really liked the game. I liked what it was trying to do. I liked the vibe. I especially liked the characters. And I was never ever really able to go back to it and play it again. And on top of that, I was never able to get around to playing other Fatal Frame games. So there was this big feeling that this game wasn't a particularly good Fatal Frame. This wasn't something that was like that really was a standout Wii U title. And I suppose the game has kind of faded away into relative obscurity. It's kind of crazy how Fatal Frame 2 Remake, a remake of the best game in the series, is coming to Switch next year, and not a single person seems to be all that excited about it. And that really bothered me so much that I went back and I finished Fatal Frame 4 and I finished Fatal Frame 5. And honestly, actually, I finished Fatal Frame 4 twice. So I finished both of these games twice, both of the Fatal Frames that are currently available on Nintendo Switch. And I came away with this kind of more thorough opinion of what I think of these games and what they do and what they offer because I really, really, really liked both. And for radically different reasons, which makes me really enthusiastic about the future of the franchise and the release of the Fatal Frame 2 remake. I said when the Fatal Frame 2 remake was announced that a lot of people were really sleeping on these games. These are probably one of those downplayed and ignored Nintendo IPs out there. And yes, this is a franchise owned by Nintendo. Just look at the credits for this game. This is something that I find really, really interesting that this game was acquired by Nintendo and immediately was written off and ignored. You consistently see people say Fatal Frame 4 and 5 are the worst Fatal Frame games in the series, that Nintendo ruined the IP, that it's just gone downhill ever since they acquired it. It's a pretty consistent thing to the point where I think it's kind of impacted the relevancy of the series as a whole because these releases have not been all that successful. Like these re-releases should have been like pretty big deals in the horror game community, and yet they didn't really leave much of an impact on anything. And now we're seeing a remake of Fatal Frame 2, and at this stage, it feels like there's no real enthusiasm behind it at all. Even though I imagine it's pretty much guaranteed to be better than Resident Evil Requiem and Silent Hill F and Silent Hill 2 Remake. Like that's kind of my takeaway playing these games again, is that like, yeah, I don't think they're the best Nintendo games out there. I think they are kind of limited. I do think the stories are kind of weird. I do think that they don't do a lot with the idea. I do think they could have done a lot more like with the horror vibe. I think they could there's a lot of room for evolution, but at the same time, these are actual horror games. That's kind of what gets me about Fatal Frame when I compare it to like Silent Hill or Resident Evil, is that like Fatal Frame actually is a real horror game where it never really made that transition into being super action based and badass and just, for a wider audience. Like Fatal Frame is a niche thing targeted at a niche audience, and it understands that. And I think that's why going back to Fatal Frame 4 and 5 has been such an interesting experience, because I don't believe these games are like forgotten classics. I don't believe these are like major milestones in Nintendo's history or like overlooked gems on Wii U. But at the same time, I really, really did enjoy playing through both, especially Fatal Frame 4. Like, after my second playthrough, I came around to the game and really decided that I really, really liked it. But Fatal Frame 5, on my second playthrough of that, I feel more and more conflicted because Fatal Frame 5, Maiden of Blackwater, feels like a proper evolution of 4. You know, the graphics are gorgeous, the environments are very wide open and varied. There's all these cool looking ghosts. There's all these characters. Like there's all these really fleshed out mechanics. All these cool puzzles. Like Fatal Frame 5 on paper seems like a way better game than Fatal Frame 4. And I even said when I finished Fatal Frame 4 that I was surprised at how limited it felt compared to 5. But playing through 5 again, encountering like the very frustrating story. The fact that like only two of the three protagonists are relevant. That like they all act like idiots. They never seem to have a cohesive plan. Like people keep getting kidnapped for the most asinine reasons, right? Like it just feels very, very forced in a way that 4 isn't. 4 has a narrative that's pretty cohesive and makes more and more sense as you do your replays and study like the notes and all that. But 5 feels very, very like that it never really comes together. That's kind of my mindset on 5. That if 5 really utilized all of its characters effectively, if it had a cohesive narrative, if it felt like a proper, like fully fleshed out experience, I think this could have been an absolute gem. But I find myself playing this like very frustrated by just how the plot plans out. Like, oops, Ren fell asleep, and two of the girls have gotten kidnapped, and now we have to go get them back. It's like things like that. It just bothers you. Like it doesn't feel like there's a rhyme or reason to it. It just feels like everything you're doing is kind of pointless, and it just has this weird like kind of undertone to it where the game does a really good job setting up the relationship between Hisoka and Yuri, right? It sets up this idea that like Hisoka saved Yuri from suicide, and they're deeply they've bonded. They become very close, and Yuri is like very dependent on her. And then Hisoka's kidnapped by ghosts, and then Yuri has to save her from her suicidal feelings, and like being a pillar and all that. Like it's this really, really cool, like evocative, like story about like women saving each other from their own feelings of like from their own suicidal feelings, right? It is unbelievably based, honestly. Like I found myself very surprised at how effective the cutscenes are when it goes into like the whole mental illness and suicidal thoughts and just bonding with other people. Like it's really shockingly effective at that specifically, but then it never really does anything with it. Like it's kind of bizarre, like how it sets up this relationship between Yuri and Hisoka, how it sets up like Miyu and her mother, and like Yuri and Miyu becoming friends. How it does that all very, very effectively, and then doesn't really do anything with it to the point where like I'm very confused about why Miyu was involved at all. Like I'm very confused about like the involvement of the other girls in the plot. Like for me, I think the plot really should have focused entirely on Yuri exploring the mountain and trying to find Hisoka. That's it. Like everything else they added in regards to like Ren and like his weird androgynous like assistant, like all of that nonsense with Miyu, like it all just feels like it doesn't really build up to anything remarkable. Like it's shocking to me how Miyu's entire motivation in this is to rescue her mother from the ghosts. And then you get her back, and then they spend like 3 chapters just sleeping, and then they're just still there in the ending. It's like, really? Like that's your big play? Like she does one thing in the entire story where she rescues Yuri when she goes to the lake by herself, but like, and it's a meaningful moment. It's really impactful. It makes you like both characters, and then you have to kind of escape like the Maiden of Blackwater together. But at the same time, like, what purpose does it serve? And that's kind of my feelings about Fatal Frame 5, kind of summed up in like the simplest possible terms is that like what purpose does the vast majority of the cast and the storylines have to do with the Maiden of Black Water? Like there's vague associations, there's vague parallels, there's vague like reasons for it. Like they all have like reasons for being there and being involved and all that. But like it just feels so weirdly disjointed. Like all the characters know each other, they hang out at the antique shop all the time, and yet inexplicably, none of them besides Yuri ever seem to really accomplish anything of value at all. Like it's so odd because the game really feels like Ren is the more important protagonist with like ties to a major series figure, Kanehiko Aso. He confronts the, Kuzahara Ose at one point. Well, I mean, in one of the endings, like you have like, the whole ghost marriage thing kind of revolves around him. Really, like the entire like ritual in this game revolves around a groom entering a box with these maidens, right? So like, Yuri's entire like it's so odd in that sense where Yuri like is clearly the protagonist. She's clearly the one like you play as the most, who accomplishes the most, who does all this stuff for other people, and yet like at the same time, like the other characters just don't really feel as if they contribute as much. Like it's shocking, like how when Hisoka goes missing, how like disinterested Yuri seems to be. Like, oh, she's been gone for a couple of days. Oh, like, and then she like goes to the mountain to find her, and then gets wrapped up in all this nonsense with like other people committing suicide and other people going missing, and like it just feels like for a long period of time, like Yuri doesn't give a shit about Hisoka at all, and like that's not really what the story should be about. And like it's interesting in this way because like the story, when it focuses on what it should be focusing on, the whole suicidal thing and like Yuri and Ahsoka, like that's all great. Like I was really shockingly invested with like a lot of that, but at the same time, like this other stuff just kills the pacing. Like the final chapter, for some reason, you have to climb up the mountain twice with two different characters, and you end up in two different different locations. But you always start right at the beginning, and it's just like, what is the point? Like that's just kind of my impression on a lot of this is like, what's the point of all this? And like I do have to like point out like one of my big major criticisms with Fatal Frame, like why exactly are these games so railroaded? That's the weird thing about like Fatal Frame 5 is that it's structured like it's an open environment that you can explore at your leisure. And I think in like certain chapters you are given a little bit of like freedom to go to different rooms and like find things and like find hidden ghosts and like notes and all that. Like, like there's a lot of that occasionally. But like you almost always have a trace that you can follow leading you to your destination. And if you don't, you're like stuck in a very specific location and you had to figure something out. So the game, like, it feels incredibly railroaded in spite of like these wide open areas that you can explore. Like I can't help but feel as if like the game would have been way better if you could have like proceeded with all of the various storylines at your own pace. So instead of like having all these three different characters that you switch to, like throughout, you just start off as Yuri and then meet other characters, and then you can start like playing as them, and then like start advancing their storylines. That's kind of how I would do it. Like I don't think the mission based system really benefits itself very well to this game. I think the way 4 did it was way more effective because it like all the characters in it like have a purpose to the plot. They're all interesting. They all have like unique things that happen to them. Like 5, not so much. I can't emphasize this enough. Like I really don't understand why Miyu was even a character in the plot, other than like drawing in people who were fans of like the older games because she has ties to an older protagonist. She's her daughter. So like I I find it so inexplicable how like Miyu was just coincidentally there and then just goes on to not do anything at all. Like she's always like doing this thing like, "Oh, don't leave me, mom. I'll be all alone." And then like, Yuri's right there. Like it's such an obnoxious thing where like the characters keep doing this thing where they're just like, "Oh, I'm so alone. No one loves me." And then there's like someone there like every single time. It's just so ridiculous. And I don't know. Like it really does feel like to me that the story and the characters really kill this and the pacing. Like objectively speaking, I think it's a way better game than Fatal Frame 4 because the ghost designs are sick. Like they all have like these really cool facial expressions and unique designs and like they have really interesting backgrounds. Like you can like see the moment of their deaths in by like touching them when they disappear. Like there's so many good things about the ghosts in this, but then like you start seeing them over and over and over and over again, and you get this feeling that the game just goes on too long. Like if you play Fatal Frame 4, the game is very reasonably paced, where you see like the same ghosts maybe one or two times throughout, and eventually like they're all connected with like specific areas, right? So you'll start seeing like certain ghosts in certain locations, and you can start like piecing together their stories, their backgrounds, how they tie together into the actual plot. But like Fatal Frame 5 feels more like a bunch of random people died on the mountain, and now you have to fight their ghosts for some reason. It just feels like it's not quite as well thought out as Fatal Frame 4. And that's the weird thing about this is that like, in spite of all my problems that I had with 4, I do think it is a better written plot than this. I think it has more interesting characters. I think it has better lore. I think the location is better implemented because the idea of exploring one of those Japanese suicide forests in this game is awesome, but you don't really do a whole lot with it. The idea of saving people from suicide is awesome until you realize just how unsympathetic most of them are. Like the idea of having multiple different protagonists with their own stories sounds amazing until you realize that two of them aren't very fleshed out, and the primary protagonist just is an amazing character that honestly feels like kind of underutilized. And that's one of the weird things about this is that like because I've been saying this for years, like I think Yuri Kozakata, the protagonist of this game, is actually one of the better female protagonists in any game I've ever seen in my life. Like she is just so likable in how she goes about like fighting these ghosts and how she's like how she is in doing the right thing. And the ending to this game is shockingly kind of beautiful in its weird way. I really really like her as a character and really hope that someday we see her come back in a sequel or another installment to kind of further along this theme. Like, and again, but like it's so this game does so much really, really, really well, but like it just doesn't feel as if it comes together. Like, whereas like Fatal Frame 4 feels like a very budget title that feels very limited, but it feels like it has a very specific thing that it's trying to do. Like, it does feel like, all the characters have their own unique motifs and things going on and mechanics and all that. Like, Fatal Frame 5 doesn't feel that way at all. Like, Fatal Frame 5 in comparison feels kind of limited and just doesn't feel as if it has like it does all this stuff right, but it doesn't come together as well. Like, and it's just such a shame. And I really hope that over the past decade, the developers have really thought about how to evolve these mechanics and make them work more effectively because they really had something there with this. Like, this really is a very distinctive, interesting little title that I think does deserve a little bit of attention among horror fans. Like this is something that I think you know, people really should have played as opposed to Silent Hill F or like Silent Hill 2 remake. Like this game like just feels more like a traditional video game. It feels like it's actually trying to do something unique and interesting. And in spite of its flaws, like I came away really, really, really enjoying it for what it was. Yeah, I think I liked 4 better. Yeah, I'm sure the older games are better. Yeah, I'm sure that like games in the future will be better. But like, for what it was, I really, really enjoyed my time with this. And you can't really argue against a feeling like that